On Christmas Eve, your phone lights up with a video, your sister laughing in a private club booth while your husband leans in and whispers the same vow he swore to you at your wedding. Now you're carrying his child, trapped in his mansion, and every door you open reveals another lie. But walking away might cost you everything, including your life. Hello, beautiful family. My daughter challenged me to hit 1,000 subscribers. So now you're all involved. Let's show her that nothing is impossible with a family behind you. Subscribe and comment below with where you're watching from. I want to know. Because seeing all your locations reminds me that stories connect us all, no matter the distance. Let's continue. The snow falls soft over Chicago, blanketing the city in white, but inside the Moretti estate, everything feels wrong. Rosalind Hale stands in the marble hallway, phone trembling in her hand, watching the video loop for the third time. Her older sister Genevieve leans into her husband like she owns him. His lips move close to her ear, whispering words Rosalind recognizes the same vow he made under the chapel lights 2 years ago. She's 8 weeks pregnant, her body still adjusting to the nausea and exhaustion, and tonight was supposed to be perfect. Instead, the Christmas tree glows behind her like a cruel joke. Dominic Moretti, the man who runs half the city's underground, who promised her protection and loyalty, has been lying to her face. And Genevieve, the sister who held her hand through their mother's funeral, is the one who took him. Rosalind doesn't cry. Not yet, because somewhere beneath the shock, a darker thought takes root. If they've been hiding this, what else are they hiding? And why now? On Christmas Eve, does it feel like she's the one being set up to disappear? The marble floor felt like ice through her silk slippers as Rosalind forced herself to move. The video played again in her mind, Genevieve's red lips curving into a smile, Dominic's hand resting on the small of her back like it belonged there. She pressed her palm against her stomach, where the tiny heartbeat she'd only just confirmed was growing, and swallowed the bile rising in her throat. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 11. In 1 hour, it would be Christmas. She found Dominic in his study, standing by the window with a glass of whiskey, watching the snow pile against the glass. He turned when she entered, and for a moment his expression softened the way it used to back when she believed every word he said. "You should be resting." His voice was low, controlled. "The doctor said the first trimester is delicate." "Who sent me the video, Dominic?" The question landed between them like a grenade. She watched his jaw tighten, watched the flicker of something dark cross his features before he smoothed it away. He set down his glass with deliberate calm. "What video?" "Don't." Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. "I saw you with her. I heard what you said to her. The same words, Dominic. The exact same promise you made to me." He crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly his hands were on her shoulders, his grip firm but not bruising. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her chest ache. "Someone is trying to destroy us. That video is edited, manipulated. Genevieve and I were discussing business, your father's estate, the trust fund transfers. Nothing more." She wanted to believe him. God. She wanted to crawl into his arms and let him make it all disappear the way he always did. But the woman in that video wasn't discussing paperwork. The woman in that video was being seduced. "Then why was she touching you like that?" Rosalind whispered. "Why were you letting her?" The front door chimed before he could answer. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, followed by a voice that made Rosalind's blood turn to ice. "Merry Christmas, little sister." Genevieve swept into the study like she owned it, wrapped in white cashmere and carrying a bottle of champagne. Her perfume filled the room, jasmine and something darker underneath. She kissed Dominic's cheek first, lingering a beat too long, then turned to Rosalind with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You look pale, Rosie. Are you feeling all right?" Rosalind's hands trembled at her sides. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab her keys and disappear into the snow before they could stop her. But she was 8 weeks pregnant with a man's child who might be sleeping with her sister, standing in a mansion owned by one of Chicago's most dangerous families, and she had nowhere to go. "I'm fine," she heard herself say. "Just tired. You should sit down." Dominic guided her toward the leather sofa, his touch gentle, almost reverent. "I'll have Maria bring you tea." Genevieve watched them with an expression Rosalind couldn't read. Something flickered behind her sister's eyes, triumph, maybe, or anticipation, like a predator watching prey stumble into a trap. "Actually," Genevieve said, settling into the armchair across from them, "I was hoping we could talk about Father's will. There are some discrepancies Callahan mentioned. Something about the trust distribution timeline." Rosalind's stomach lurched. The trust. Her father's $1 billion legacy. split between his two daughters but controlled entirely by Rosalind until her 30th birthday or until she had a child. Then it transferred to the next generation. Her hand moved instinctively to her abdomen. Genevieve's gaze followed the movement, and her smile widened by a fraction. "Something you want to share with us, Rosie?" The grandfather clock began to chime. Midnight. Christmas Day. And Rosalind realized, with horrible clarity, that she wasn't just surrounded by liars. She was trapped in a house with two people who had every reason to want her dead. Rosalind didn't sleep that night. She lay in the darkness of the master bedroom, listening to Dominic's steady breathing beside her, and stared at the ceiling until her eyes burned. Every time she closed them, she saw Genevieve smile. That knowing, predatory curve of her lips when her gaze had dropped to Rosalind's stomach. She knows, or she suspects. At 4 a.m, Rosalind slipped out of bed. Dominic didn't stir, he never did when he'd been drinking, and she padded barefoot down the corridor toward his study. The house was silent except for the distant hum of the heating system and the occasional creak of settling wood. Christmas lights blinked from the tree in the foyer below, casting red and green shadows across the walls like warning signals. The study door was unlocked. She stepped inside and closed it behind her, heart pounding so loudly she was certain the guards outside would hear it. Dominic's desk dominated the room, a massive mahogany piece that had belonged to his father and his father before that. 3 generations of Moretti secrets, locked inside its drawers. She tried the top drawer first. Locked. The second and third slid open easily, revealing nothing but contracts, letterhead, and a loaded pistol she pretended not to see. But the bottom drawer, the deep one on the left, wouldn't budge. The keyhole glinted in the dim light like a tiny, mocking eye. "Think, Rosalind. Think." She remembered her father teaching her to pick locks when she was 12, back when he still believed she'd take over the family business, back before he'd decided Genevieve was too reckless and Rosalind was too soft, and split his empire between them in a way that satisfied no one. Her fingers found a bobby pin in her robe pocket, a habit from her teenage years she'd never broken, and she knelt beside the desk. The lock clicked open on her 3rd attempt. Inside, she found a leather folder thick with documents, bank statements from the Cayman Islands, transfer receipts dated over the past 18 months, and a name that made her vision blur: Genevieve Hale. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, wired monthly, all from accounts that should have been frozen until Rosalind's 30th birthday. "He's been stealing from me." They both have. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Rosalind shoved the folder back inside and eased the drawer shut, her pulse screaming in her ears. She was on her feet and halfway to the bookshelf when the door swung open. Genevieve stood in the doorway, wrapped in a silk robe, her hair tumbling over her shoulders in perfect waves. She looked like she'd just stepped out of a magazine spread, not like someone who'd been caught prowling at 4 a.m. "Couldn't sleep either?" Genevieve's voice was honey smooth, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. "I heard footsteps. I was looking for something to read." Rosalind gestured vaguely at the shelves. "The baby makes it hard to settle." "The baby!" Genevieve stepped closer, and Rosalind caught a whiff of that jasmine perfume again, cloying, suffocating. "You haven't told Dominic yet, have you? I saw your face when I mentioned Father's will. You look terrified." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do." Genevieve's smile returned, and this time it was almost pitying. "You were always Father's favorite, Rosie. The good daughter, the one who followed the rules and married well and did everything right. But you never understood how this world actually works." Rosalind's throat tightened. "And you do?" "I understand survival." Genevieve reached out and brushed a strand of hair from Rosalind's face, the gesture almost tender. "I understand that in families like ours, love is a currency. And you've been spending yours on a man who's already bankrupt." The words landed like a slap. Rosalind stepped back, her spine hitting the bookshelf. Somewhere in the house, a door closed. Footsteps approached. "Go back to bed, little sister." Genevieve's voice dropped to a whisper. "And be careful who you trust. This house has eyes everywhere." She slipped out of the study just as Dominic's shadow appeared at the end of the corridor. Rosalind pressed herself against the books, barely breathing, and listened to their murmured conversation fade down the hall. When silence returned, she pulled out her phone and found Callahan Reeves' number, her father's attorney, the only person left who might tell her the truth. Her fingers trembled as she typed, "I need to see you. Tomorrow. Don't tell anyone." The reply came 30 seconds later, "Come alone. And Rosalind, be careful. If you die before that baby is born, they inherit everything." 2 days after Christmas, the Drake Hotel ballroom glittered with Chicago's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across silk gowns and tailored suits, and the string quartet played something soft and forgettable beneath the hum of conversation. Rosalind stood near the ice sculpture, a glass of sparkling water pressed against her palm, watching her husband work the room like he owned every soul in it. Dominic moved through the crowd with the ease of a man who'd grown up knowing exactly how much power he wielded. A handshake here, a low word there, and deals worth millions were sealed before the champagne went flat. He was magnetic, dangerous, and right now, his hand was resting on the small of Genevieve's back as he introduced her to a silver-haired banker from New York. Rosalind's stomach churned. She couldn't tell anymore if it was morning sickness or rage. She'd met with Callahan that morning in a cafe 3 blocks from the courthouse. He'd confirmed her worst fears, with the detached precision of a man who'd seen too many family fortunes torn apart by betrayal. The trust was structured to transfer to her firstborn child upon birth, but only if Rosalind was alive to sign the final documents. If she died before then, control reverted to the co-trustees named in her father's will, Dominic Moretti and Genevieve Hale. "They've been planning this for at least 2 years, Callahan had said, sliding a folder across the table. "Maybe longer. Your sister approached Dominic before he ever proposed to you. I have emails." Now Rosalind watched them laugh together across the ballroom, and she understood. She'd never been a wife. She'd been a transaction. The powder room was mercifully empty when she slipped inside. She gripped the marble counter and stared at her reflection, pale skin, shadows under her eyes, the barely visible curve of her belly beneath the black velvet gown. She looked like a ghost haunting her own life. The door swung open. Genevieve entered in a cloud of jasmine, her crimson dress clinging to her frame like it had been painted on. She met Rosalind's eyes in the mirror and smiled. "You're hiding. I needed air. There's plenty of air out there." Genevieve moved closer, her heels clicking against the tile. "You're avoiding him. Or maybe you're avoiding me." Rosalind turned to face her sister. Something hardened in her chest, a wall she hadn't known she was building. "Why are you doing this, Genevieve?" "Doing what? Don't play games with me. I saw the transfers. I know about the offshore accounts." Her voice dropped. "I know what you're planning." For a moment, Genevieve's mask flickered. Something raw and ugly flashed behind her eyes before she smoothed it away. When she spoke again, her voice was ice. "You were always Father's favorite, his perfect little princess who could do no wrong." She stepped closer, close enough that Rosalind could see the fury burning beneath her composure. "He gave you everything. The house, the business, the trust. And what did I get? Scraps, promises, a pat on the head, and instructions to support my baby sister. That's not true." "It is true." Genevieve's whisper cut like a blade. "And now it's my turn. You had your chance to be happy, Rosie. You had everything handed to you, and you still couldn't hold on to it." Rosalind's hands trembled at her sides. "So you took my husband. I took what was owed to me." The words hung in the air between them, toxic and final. Rosalind felt something break inside her, the last fragile thread of hope that this was all a misunderstanding, that her sister still loved her somewhere beneath the jealousy. "I'm leaving tonight," Rosalind said quietly. "I'm taking my things and I'm going." Genevieve laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "No, you're not. Dominic's men are stationed at every exit. The gates are locked. Your car keys are in his safe." She leaned in, her breath warm against Rosalind's ear. "You're not a wife anymore, little sister. You're a prisoner, and you'll stay one until that baby is born." She pulled back, smoothed her dress, and checked her lipstick in the mirror. "Smile pretty when you come back out. People are starting to talk." The door clicked shut behind her. Rosalind stood frozen, her reflection staring back at her with hollow eyes. She pressed her palm against her stomach, felt the warmth of her own skin, and made a silent promise to the life growing inside her. "I will get us out of here, whatever it takes. Hit subscribe and let me keep you company with a new story every day." The safe house was a brownstone in Lincoln Park, 3 miles from the Moretti estate but a world away from its gilded cage. Rosalind sat on a worn leather couch, a cup of cold tea untouched in her hands, and stared at the man who'd just risked everything to help her. Matteo Salvatore looked nothing like the enforcer she'd seen standing in Dominic's shadow for the past 2 years. Without the tailored suits and cold professionalism, he seemed younger, almost vulnerable. A bruise bloomed across his cheekbone from where one of Dominic's guards had landed a punch during their escape through the service entrance. He hadn't complained once. "You should drink that." He nodded toward the tea. "You haven't eaten anything since yesterday." "I'm not hungry. The baby is." The words hit her like a splash of cold water. She looked up, searching his face for judgment or calculation, but found only quiet concern. He knew about the pregnancy, Of course he did. Mateo knew everything that happened inside that house. It was his job to know. How long? She asked. How long have you known what they were planning? Mateo settled into the armchair across from her, his movements careful, deliberate. 6 months. Maybe longer. I started noticing things, meetings Dominic didn't want recorded, calls he took in the wine cellar where the signal blockers are, your sister visiting when you weren't home. And you said nothing. I had no proof. And you wouldn't have believed me. His dark eyes held hers without flinching. You loved him. People in love don't see the knife until it's already in their back. Rosalind set down the tea, her fingers trembling. Outside, snow continued to fall, muffling the sounds of the city like a thick white curtain. She'd made it out of the estate through a delivery entrance while Dominic was occupied with a phone call from New York. Mateo had been waiting with a car, engine running, headlights off. Why are you helping me? The question had been burning in her throat since they'd pulled away from the mansion. You've worked for Dominic for years. You're his second in command. His brother in everything but blood. Mateo was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I watched my mother die in a house like that, surrounded by money and power and men who saw her as property. She smiled for the cameras and bled behind closed doors. He looked away, jaw tight. I swore I'd never let that happen to someone else, not if I could stop it. Something shifted in Rosalind's chest, a crack in the armor she'd been building since Christmas Eve. She wanted to trust him. God, she wanted to trust someone. But trust had nearly gotten her killed. Dominic will come looking for me. He already is. Mateo pulled out his phone, showing her a series of texts. He's got men searching every hotel, every train station, every airport in the city. He's called in favors from 3 other families. Her blood ran cold. Then we're not safe here. We're safe enough for tonight. This place belongs to someone who owes me, not him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But tomorrow, we need to move. I have contacts in Detroit, a doctor who can monitor your pregnancy, a lawyer who can help you access your accounts without Dominic knowing. Detroit. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Another city, another life. And then what? Then we build a case. We gather evidence, the bank transfers, the forged documents, whatever else they're hiding. And we take it to people who can actually hurt him. Mateo's expression hardened. Dominic's not untouchable, Rosalind. He just wants you to think he is. She stood abruptly, crossing to the window. The snow had turned the street into a postcard, all soft edges and quiet beauty. But she knew what lurked beneath the surface. Chicago was Dominic's city, and every shadow could hide one of his men. There's something else. Mateo's voice was careful now, measured. Something I found in his files last month. She turned. What? He's been meeting with the Castellano family. Rivals from the South Side. Mateo paused. And your sister's been feeding them information about Moretti operations. Shipment routes, warehouse locations, names of informants. Rosalind's mind raced. She's betraying him too? She's playing both sides. Whoever wins, she walks away rich. His mouth twisted. Your sister doesn't love Dominic. She doesn't love anyone. She just loves winning. The revelation should have shocked her. Instead, it settled into place like the final piece of a puzzle she'd been assembling her whole life. Genevieve had always been ruthless. Rosalind had just never been her target before. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered before Mateo could stop her. Dominic's voice filled her ear, soft and dangerous. Come home, Rosalind, before someone gets hurt. The storm hit at midnight, turning the highway into a river of white. Rosalind gripped the dashboard as Mateo navigated the SUV through blinding snow, wipers fighting a losing battle against the onslaught. Behind them, headlights appeared and disappeared through the curtain of ice. 2 cars, maybe 3, gaining ground with every passing minute. They found us. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. How did they find us? Someone talked. Mateo's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Or they tracked your phone before we ditched it. Doesn't matter now. He yanked the wheel hard, sending them skidding onto an exit ramp. Rosalind's shoulder slammed against the door, and she wrapped her arms instinctively around her stomach. The baby. She had to protect the baby. Everything else was secondary. The SUV fishtailed onto a side road, then another, until the city lights faded behind them, and darkness swallowed everything except the snow. Mateo killed the headlights and drove by memory, his jaw set like stone. There's a warehouse half a mile ahead, abandoned since the meatpacking plant closed. He glanced at her. We hide there until they pass, then double back toward the Indiana border. And if they don't pass? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The warehouse loomed out of the storm like a dead thing, all broken windows and rusted metal. Mateo pulled the SUV behind a collapsed loading dock and cut the engine. Silence crashed over them, broken only by the howl of wind and the tick of cooling metal. "Stay here." He reached beneath his seat and pulled out a handgun. "Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me." "Mateo." "I mean it, Rosalind." His eyes found hers in the darkness, and something fierce burned behind them. "I didn't get you this far to lose you now." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the snow like a shadow. She hit the locks and pressed herself low in the seat, heart hammering against her ribs. Through the frost-covered window, she watched the storm swirl and dance, transforming the world into something unrecognizable. Minutes stretched into eternity. She counted her breaths in for 4, out for 4 the way her therapist had taught her after her mother's funeral. "Stay calm. Stay focused. The baby needs you calm." A gunshot cracked through the night. Rosalind's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a scream. Another shot followed, then shouting voices she didn't recognize, angry and urgent. She heard scuffling, the thud of bodies against metal, and then silence again. The driver's door handle rattled. She stopped breathing. Through the window, she could see a figure tall, broad-shouldered, face obscured by the storm. Not Mateo. The build was wrong, the posture too aggressive. The handle rattled again, harder this time. "Rosalind." The voice was muffled but unmistakable. "Open the door. Dominic wants you home." She didn't move, didn't speak. The figure slammed a fist against the glass, and a spiderweb crack spread across the window. Then another shape emerged from the darkness faster, more fluid. She heard a grunt, a sickening crack, and the figure at her door crumpled into the snow. Mateo appeared in his place, blood on his knuckles, breathing hard. "We need to move. Now." She unlocked the door and scrambled out, her feet sinking into ankle-deep snow. Mateo grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the warehouse entrance, stepping over the unconscious guard without a second glance. Inside, the darkness was absolute, thick with the smell of rust and decay. "There's a back exit." His voice was barely a whisper. "Through the old processing floor. Watch your step." They moved through the blackness, Mateo guiding her with one hand on her elbow and the other holding his weapon ready. Somewhere behind them, doors crashed open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness, sweeping left and right like searchlights. Rosalind's foot caught on something, a chain, a pipe. She couldn't tell and she stumbled. Pain shot through her ankle, and a cry escaped her lips before she could stop it. The flashlight swung toward them. Mateo didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms and ran, boots pounding against concrete, breath ragged in her ear. She buried her face against his chest and felt his heart racing as fast as her own. They burst through a rusted door into the storm, and he didn't stop running until they reached a chain-link fence at the property's edge. He set her down, ripped a hole in the fence with his bare hands, and pushed her through. "There's a clinic 2 miles east. Doctor named Vasquez. Tell her Mateo sent you." He pressed car keys into her palm. Gray sedan, parked behind the gas station on Halstead. "You're not coming? Someone needs to lead them away from you." He cupped her face in his bloodied hands, and for a moment, the storm seemed to quiet around them. "Get to the clinic. Protect that baby. I'll find you." He kissed her forehead quick, fierce, and then he was gone, running back toward the warehouse, toward the men with guns and flashlights. Rosalind ran the other direction, tears freezing on her cheeks, one hand pressed against her stomach. She made it 3 blocks before the cramping started. The clinic was a narrow building wedged between a laundromat and a boarded-up pharmacy, its windows dark, except for a single light burning on the 2nd floor. Rosalind stumbled through the back entrance, one hand braced against the wall, the other clutching her stomach as another wave of cramping tightened through her abdomen. Dr. Vasquez was waiting. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and steady hands. She took one look at Rosalind and guided her to an examination table without a word. The room smelled like antiseptic and lavender, and somewhere a space heater hummed against the cold seeping through the walls. "How far along?" Vasquez's voice was calm, professional. 8 weeks. Almost 9. Rosalind's teeth chattered. "I was running. I fell. There's cramping. Lie back. Breathe slowly." Vasquez pulled on gloves and reached for an ultrasound wand. Mateo called ahead. "I know who you are, and I know who's looking for you. Right now, none of that matters. Right now, we focus on this baby." The gel was cold against Rosalind's skin. She stared at the ceiling, counting the water stains, trying to focus on anything except the terror clawing at her chest. If she lost this baby, if Dominic's men had already taken the one thing she had left, A heartbeat filled the room, fast and strong, like a tiny drum. There. Vasquez turned the monitor toward her. You see that flutter? That's your baby. Heartbeat steady. Placement looks good. The cramping is likely stress-related. Maybe some minor spotting from exertion. But the pregnancy is intact. Rosalind exhaled a sob she hadn't known she was holding. Tears spilled down her temples into her hair, and she pressed her palm against her mouth to muffle the sound. The baby was safe. After everything, the chase, the fall, the freezing run through empty streets, her baby was still fighting. You need rest. Vasquez handed her a tissue. Real rest. Not hiding in cars and running through snowstorms. Your body is under enormous strain, and stress at this stage can cause complications. I can't rest. They're looking for me. Then find somewhere they won't look. Vasquez peeled off her gloves and crossed to a small desk, pulling out a prescription pad. I'm writing you a referral to a colleague in Detroit. Off the books, untraceable. She runs a women's shelter that caters to, let's call them, complicated situations. Rosalind sat up slowly, her body aching in places she hadn't noticed until now. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. I know Mateo. He saved my daughter's life 3 years ago, when her ex-husband came looking for her with a knife. Vasquez's expression softened. Men like him are rare in this world. If he's risking everything to protect you, then you're worth protecting. The door at the front of the clinic rattled. Both women froze. Vasquez held up a hand, stay quiet, and moved silently toward the hallway. Rosalind swung her legs off the table. Every muscle tensed to run again, even though her body screamed in protest. Voices drifted up from below. Low, male, demanding. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the tone. Dominic's men. They'd tracked her here. Vasquez returned, her face grim. Backstairs. There's a fire escape that leads to the alley. She pressed a folded paper into Rosalind's hand. Address in Detroit. Memorize it, then destroy it. Don't trust anyone who claims to know Dominic. Don't use credit cards. Don't call anyone from your old life. What about Mateo? If he's alive, he'll find you. That man has a talent for surviving the unsurvivable. Vasquez gripped her shoulders. Now go. And Rosalind, that baby is a fighter. Don't let anyone take that from either of you. Rosalind ran. The fire escape groaned under her weight, ice making each step treacherous. She dropped into the alley and pressed herself against the brick wall, listening. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. A car door slammed. Footsteps crunched through snow, moving away from her, not toward. She allowed herself one breath, then another. Her phone was gone, destroyed hours ago. Her wallet held $40 and a fake ID Mateo had given her. The address in her hand led to a city she'd never visited, to people she'd never met, to a future she couldn't imagine. But her baby's heartbeat was still echoing in her ears, steady and defiant. She memorized the address, tore the paper into pieces, and scattered them in the wind. Then Rosalind Hale Moretti disappeared into the Chicago night, carrying nothing but the life growing inside her and a promise she intended to keep. The safe house in Detroit was a converted factory loft above a printing press that hadn't operated in decades. Rosalind had been there for 3 weeks, watching winter settle over the city through windows thick with grime, waiting for news that never came. Mateo was alive. She'd received a single coded message through Vasquez confirming that much, but he was still in Chicago, still running interference while Dominic's men tore the city apart looking for her. Tonight, she wasn't waiting anymore. The laptop Vasquez's contact had provided was ancient but functional, its screen casting blue light across Rosalind's face as she navigated the encryption software Mateo had taught her to use. Her fingers trembled over the keys, but her mind was sharp, focused. 3 weeks of rest had restored her strength. 3 weeks of silence had sharpened her resolve. Dominic's private server was protected by layers of security that would have stopped most people. But Rosalind wasn't most people. Her father had built his empire on information, and he'd taught both his daughters how to find it. Genevieve had used those skills for manipulation. Rosalind had buried them, tried to become the perfect wife who didn't ask questions. She was done not asking questions. The first file she cracked contained bank records. 18 months of transfers, just like Callahan had shown her, but these went deeper. Shell companies in the Caymans, Luxembourg, Singapore, money flowing out of her father's trust and into accounts controlled by Dominic and Genevieve, but also to names she didn't recognize. Castellano, Varga, DeLuca, rival families. Dominic was paying off rival families. The second file made her blood run cold. Insurance documents, medical records, a detailed timeline. Her timeline. Every doctor's appointment, every prescription, every scan since her wedding. Someone had been tracking her fertility, waiting for confirmation of pregnancy. They'd planned this from the beginning. Before the proposal, before the first kiss, maybe before they'd even met. She opened the third file and stopped breathing. It was a draft document, unsigned but complete. A death certificate. Her name, her birth date, her medical history all filled in, waiting only for a date and a signature. Cause of death, complications during childbirth. They were going to let her deliver the baby. Then they were going to kill her and make it look natural. Rosalind pushed back from the laptop, nausea rolling through her that had nothing to do with pregnancy. She'd suspected betrayal. She'd prepared for danger. But seeing her own death certificate, clinical and cold, reduced her to a line item in someone else's plan. The door opened behind her. She spun, grabbing the knife she'd started keeping within reach, and found Matteo standing in the doorway. He looked like hell, a healing cut above his eyebrow, shadows carved deep beneath his eyes, a week's worth of stubble darkening his jaw. But he was alive. He was here. You should have told me you were coming. Her voice cracked. I almost stabbed you. I would have deserved it. He closed the door and crossed to her in 3 strides, his eyes scanning her face, her body, searching for damage. Are you okay? The baby? We're fine, both of us. She lowered the knife. Matteo, I found something. Everything. It's worse than we thought. She showed him the files, watched his expression harden as he scrolled through the bank records, the medical surveillance, the death certificate. When he finished, his hands were shaking with barely contained rage. I'll kill him. The words were quiet, matter of fact. I'll walk back into that house and put a bullet in his skull. No, Rosalind grabbed his arm. That's what he'd expect. That's what he'd want you dead. Me alone. No witnesses. She pulled up a new window on the laptop. We do this my way. We send everything to Callahan and the FBI. We burn his empire down with evidence, not violence. Matteo stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, respect, maybe, or something deeper. You've changed. I had to. She saved the files to an encrypted drive and ejected it. Forward these to Callahan. Tell him to contact his friend at the federal prosecutor's office. And Matteo, she met his eyes. Tell him I want a meeting. Neutral ground. It's time Dominic and I had a conversation. Hit subscribe and let me keep you company with a new story every day. Co-pilot said, The Armitage Estate sat on 40 acres. The Armitage Estate sat on 40 acres of frozen lakefront. Neutral territory belonging to a family that had brokered peace between Chicago's warring factions for 3 generations. Rosalind stood in the Grand Library, her back to the fireplace, watching snow fall beyond the tall windows while she waited for her husband to arrive. She was 12 weeks pregnant now. The nausea had finally eased, replaced by a strange clarity that settled over her like armor. Callahan stood to her left, a leather briefcase containing copies of every document she'd recovered. Matteo stood to her right, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating from his body. He'd argued against this meeting for hours, but she'd refused to back down. The door opened at exactly 3 o'clock. Dominic entered first, impeccable in a charcoal suit, his expression unreadable. Genevieve followed a step behind, wrapped in cream cashmere, her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. 2 of Dominic's guards remained in the hallway. The Armitage family's rules prohibited weapons inside the library. Rosalind. Dominic's voice was soft, almost tender. You look well. Don't. She held up a hand. We're not here for pleasantries. We're here to negotiate. Genevieve laughed, a brittle sound. Negotiate what? You ran away in the middle of the night like a frightened child. You have nothing. I have everything. Rosalind nodded to Callahan, who opened his briefcase and spread documents across the antique table between them. Bank records, transfer receipts, the forged will, the fake death certificate, 18 months of financial fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and… She pulled out her phone and pressed play on a recording, Dominic's voice authorizing the hit on Marco Bianchi last September. The FBI has been trying to pin that murder on someone for months. The color drained from Dominic's face. Beside him, Genevieve's smile vanished like smoke. Where did you get that? Dominic's composure cracked, revealing something ugly beneath. That recording doesn't exist. It exists because you trusted the wrong people. Rosalind met his gaze without flinching. Your own men are tired of watching you destroy everything your father built. They're tired of taking orders from a woman who's selling secrets to your enemies. She watched Dominic's eyes cut toward Genevieve, a flicker of doubt, quickly suppressed. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. Here's what's going to happen. Rosalind's voice was steady, each word deliberate. You're going to sign over your rights to my inheritance. You're going to sign divorce papers relinquishing any claim to our child. and you're going to disappear from my life permanently. And if I refuse, then copies of everything in this room go to the FBI, the IRS, and every news outlet in the country. Your empire collapses, your allies abandon you, and you spend the rest of your life in federal prison." She paused. "Or the Castellanos find out that Genevieve has been playing both sides, and they handle the problem themselves." Genevieve stepped forward, her composure finally shattering. "You wouldn't. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided my life was worth less than money." Rosalind's voice didn't waver. "You looked me in the eye on Christmas Eve, knowing you were planning to murder me. You smiled while you plotted to take my child's inheritance." She shook her head slowly. "I don't owe you mercy. I don't owe you anything." Silence stretched through the library. The fire crackled. Snow continued to fall. Dominic moved first. He crossed to the table, picked up the divorce papers Callahan had prepared, and read them with the cold efficiency of a man calculating losses. When he looked up, his expression was carved from stone. "You think this is over?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. "You think signing papers changes what you are to me?" Mateo shifted beside her, ready to move. Rosalind placed a hand on his arm. "Sign the papers, Dominic. Walk away while you still can." For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he picked up the pen. His signature was sharp, angry. He threw the pen down and straightened his jacket. "This isn't finished, Rosalind. It will never be finished." He walked out without looking back. Genevieve lingered, her eyes burning with hatred. "You'll regret this." Her whisper was poison. "I promise you that." Then she was gone too, and Rosalind finally allowed herself to breathe. Co-pilot said. The call came at 2 in the morning, 3 days after the meeting at Armitage Estate. Rosalind was asleep in the Detroit safe house, dreaming of nothing, when her burner phone shattered the silence. She answered on the second ring, already knowing something was wrong. "They're moving tonight." Callahan's voice was strained, urgent. Dominic made contact with someone inside the prosecutor's office. He knows about the FBI investigation. He's liquidating everything and disappearing before they can issue warrants. Rosalind sat up, her heart pounding. "What about the evidence we submitted? Still being processed." "Red tape, bureaucracy, it could take weeks before they act." A pause. "But that's not why I'm calling. Rosalind, Genevieve booked a flight to Geneva this afternoon. One way. She's running. Let her run. You don't understand." Before she left, she made a call to the Castellano family. "I have a source inside their organization." Callahan's voice dropped. "She told them where you are. She sold your location for safe passage out of the country." The room tilted. Rosalind gripped the edge of the mattress, forcing herself to think through the fear. The Castellanos had no loyalty to Dominic, but they had no love for witnesses either. If Genevieve had told them about the evidence, Rosalind possessed evidence that implicated their business dealings too. "How long do I have?" "Hours. Maybe less. They're sending someone tonight." She was already moving, pulling on clothes, grabbing the go-bag Mateo had prepared weeks ago. Her hands trembled, but her mind was clear. She'd survived Dominic. She'd survived Genevieve. She would survive this too. "Where's Mateo?" "En route to you now. He should arrive within the hour." Callahan hesitated. "There's a private airfield outside Ann Arbor. A client of mine owns it, no questions asked. If you can get there before dawn, I can have a plane waiting." "Where would it take me?" "Anywhere you want to go. Boston, Miami, overseas. Somewhere Dominic can't reach, where you can wait out the investigation in safety." His voice softened. "You've done everything right, Rosalind. Now let me help you disappear." She ended the call and moved to the window, scanning the street below. Empty, quiet, but that meant nothing. The Castellanos didn't announce themselves with noise, they announced themselves with silence. Right before everything exploded, 20 minutes later, headlights swept across the building. Rosalind's hand closed around the knife at her hip, but then she recognized the car, the gray sedan Mateo had been using since Chicago. She met him at the door, and the relief on his face when he saw her standing there made something twist in her chest. "We need to go. Now." He grabbed her bag, his eyes scanning the shadows behind her. "Callahan told you about the Castellanos?" "He told me." "Then you know we can't fight this one. Not tonight. Not with—" His gaze dropped to her stomach, and his jaw tightened. "Not with everything at stake." They were in the car within minutes, speeding through empty streets toward the highway. Rosalind watched Detroit disappear in the rearview mirror. Another city she was leaving behind. Another life she was shedding like dead skin. 13 weeks pregnant, running from killers, trusting a man she'd known for barely a month. Matteo. She spoke without looking at him. Why are you still here? You could have walked away a dozen times. Gone back to Dominic. Claimed you were playing me. He would have believed you. He was quiet for a long moment. The highway stretched ahead, dark and endless. Because I've spent my whole life protecting people who didn't deserve it. His voice was rough. Dominic. His father before him. Men who saw loyalty as a weapon instead of a gift. He glanced at her. You're different. You had every reason to become like them, and you didn't. You fought back without becoming a monster. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. He reached over and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. It's choosing to keep going anyway. It's protecting something bigger than yourself. Dawn was breaking over the horizon when they reached the airfield. A small plane waited on the tarmac, engines already humming. Callahan stood beside it, briefcase in hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Rosalind paused at the bottom of the stairs, turning back to face the sunrise. Somewhere behind her, Dominic was scrambling to save his empire. Genevieve was fleeing to Europe. The Castellanos were hunting a woman who'd already vanished. She placed her hand on her stomach and felt the faintest flutter, the first movement, barely there, like a whisper from the future. We're going to be okay, she murmured. Both of us. Then she climbed the stairs and let the sky swallow her whole. Boston in early spring smelled like rain and possibility. Rosalind stood at the window of Callahan's office, watching boats drift across the harbor, one hand resting on the swell of her belly. 20 weeks now, halfway there. The baby kicked against her palm, strong and insistent, demanding acknowledgement. Sign here. Callahan slid the final document across his desk. And here. And one more at the bottom. She crossed the room and picked up the pen. Her signature had changed over the past month, steadier, more deliberate. Nothing like the nervous scrawl she'd used on her marriage certificate 2 years ago. The divorce was final. The trust was restored. Her father's empire belonged to her again. Every cent accounted for. Every stolen dollar clawed back through legal channels that had taken Callahan's team 3 months to navigate. It's done. Callahan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion and satisfaction warring on his face. Dominic Moretti is officially under federal investigation. His assets are frozen pending trial. The FBI executed warrants on 6 properties last week. And Genevieve? Still in Geneva. Swiss authorities won't extradite, but she's effectively exiled. If she sets foot in the U.S., she'll be arrested. He paused. She tried to contact you last week, through an intermediary. Rosalind's stomach tightened. What did she want? Forgiveness, apparently. She claims Dominic manipulated her, that she never meant for things to go so far. Callahan's expression was carefully neutral. I told the intermediary you weren't interested. You told them correctly. The door opened behind her. Matteo entered carrying 2 cups of coffee, setting one on Callahan's desk before crossing to Rosalind. He'd changed in the months since Chicago. The sharp edges softened. The constant vigilance eased into something closer to peace. He'd left the mafia life behind completely, using savings he'd hidden for years to start fresh. No more guns, no more shadows. Just a small security consulting firm and an apartment 10 minutes from hers. Everything signed? He handed her the second cup decaf, exactly how she liked it. Everything signed. She took a sip, letting the warmth settle her nerves. It's over. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Dominic was contained, not defeated. His trial could take years, and men like him had long memories. She would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering if today was the day his reach finally extended far enough to touch her again. Matteo seemed to read her thoughts. I spoke to the security team this morning. The new system at your apartment is fully operational. Motion sensors, cameras, panic buttons in every room. He hesitated. I could stay, if you wanted, just until you feel safe. I feel safe. She met his eyes, and something warm unfurled in her chest. I feel safe because of you. They walked to the harbor after leaving Callahan's office, the spring air soft against Rosalind's skin. Seagulls cried overhead, and children chased each other along the waterfront while their parents watched from benches. Normal life. Ordinary moments. Things she'd almost forgotten existed. I've been thinking. Matteo stopped at a railing overlooking the water. About what comes next. For both of us. And I know you've been through hell. I know trust doesn't come easy anymore. And I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. He turned to face her, and she saw vulnerability in his expression, something she'd rarely glimpsed beneath his careful composure. But I need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, whatever your daughter needs. Daughter? Rosalind blinked. How did you know? Callahan mentioned it. The ultrasound last week. His mouth curved into a tentative smile. A girl. That's incredible, Rosalind. She laughed, a real laugh, the first one in months, and pressed her hand against her belly where her daughter was somersaulting with apparent enthusiasm. A girl, a new life, untouched by the darkness of the world she'd escaped. A chance to do everything differently. I want to establish a foundation. The words came suddenly, surprising even herself. In my father's name. For women escaping dangerous situations, safe houses, legal aid, medical care, everything I had access to that most people don't. Mateo nodded slowly. That sounds like something worth building. Will you help me? I'll help you with anything. He took her hand, his grip gentle. For as long as you'll let me. They stood together at the harbor's edge, watching the sun sink toward the water. Behind them, the city hummed with life. Ahead, the future stretched wide and uncertain and full of terrifying possibility. Rosalind squeezed Mateo's hand and smiled. For the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The cafe near the harbor had become her favorite place in Boston. Rosalind sat at a corner table by the window, spring sunshine warming her face, watching sailboats glide across water that sparkled like scattered diamonds. Her belly was round now, impossible to hide, and she'd stopped trying months ago. 20 weeks had become 24, then 28, and now she was here 5 months along, signing divorce papers that should have felt like an ending but tasted like freedom instead. Callahan had left an hour ago, taking the finalized documents back to his office where they'd be filed and sealed and transformed into legal fact. Dominic Moretti was no longer her husband. His name would never appear on her daughter's birth certificate. Whatever empire he'd tried to build on her bones was crumbling, brick by brick, under the weight of federal investigation. The cafe door chimed. Mateo entered carrying a small paper bag, his smile easy in a way she'd never seen during those desperate weeks in Chicago. He'd grown a beard since then, neatly trimmed, softening the hard angles of his jaw, and traded his dark suits for jeans and leather jackets that made him look younger, less haunted. Congratulations. He set the bag in front of her. Officially a free woman. She opened it and found a cupcake inside, chocolate with pink frosting and a tiny sugar flower on top. Something ridiculous and sweet and completely unnecessary. Her eyes stung. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. He slid into the chair across from her. You've earned something to celebrate, Rosalind. Most people would have broken under what you survived. I almost did. Multiple times. She picked at the frosting with her fingernail, not eating yet, just touching. There were nights in Detroit when I couldn't stop shaking, when I was certain they'd find me, certain I'd wake up with Dominic's men standing over my bed. But you kept going. Because of her. She pressed her palm against her belly, felt her daughter respond with a lazy kick. Because she deserved a mother who fought, not one who surrendered. They sat in comfortable silence, watching pedestrians pass outside the window. A mother pushed a stroller along the sidewalk, pausing to point at a pigeon for her toddler. An elderly couple walked hand in hand, their pace slow but synchronized, decades of partnership visible in every step. Ordinary miracles, the kind of life Rosalind had stopped believing was possible for her. I found a building. She spoke without planning to, the words escaping before she could second-guess them. For the foundation, it's a converted warehouse in Southie. Needs work, but the bones are solid. 12 units for emergency housing, plus office space for counselors and legal aid. Mateo's eyebrows rose. You've been busy. I've been motivated. She finally took a bite of the cupcake, closing her eyes as chocolate melted across her tongue. My father spent his whole life accumulating power. I want to spend mine giving it away. To women like me, like your mother. Women who need someone in their corner. The Hale Foundation. He tested the name, nodding slowly. It suits you. I was thinking the Hale Salvatore Foundation, actually. She watched his expression shift surprise, then confusion, then something raw and unguarded. You saved my life, Mateo. You walked away from everything you knew to protect a woman you barely understood. That deserves recognition. I didn't do it for recognition. I know. That's why you deserve it. He looked away, jaw working, and she saw him fighting something internal, old wounds, old beliefs about worthiness and redemption. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Second chances, she said softly. That's what this foundation is about. You taught me they were possible. Let me return the favor. His fingers turned beneath hers, intertwining, holding on. When he met her eyes again, they were bright with unshed emotion. Okay. His voice was rough. Okay, Rosalind. She smiled a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and warmed her chest and made her daughter kick with apparent approval. Outside, the harbor glittered under springtime sun. Somewhere far away, Dominic was watching his kingdom collapse. Genevieve was hiding in a country that would never feel like home. But here, in this small cafe in Boston, Rosalind Hale placed her hand on her belly, felt her future moving beneath her palm, and finally understood what her father had never learned. Power wasn't about control, it was about choice. And for the first time in her life, every choice was hers. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Your comments help shape future episodes should Rosalind and Mateo's story continue. Let me know below.